The blade was not meant for him. It was silent, precise, and unstoppable, descending through royal light toward the heart of a queen the galaxy believed untouchable. But one human moved, without hesitation. No armor of rank, no oath of loyalty, only a decision made faster than fear. He stepped forward. Delegates from 100 civilizations observed the coronation renewal in solemn silence, the living symbol of continuity in a galaxy accustomed to fracture. At the edge of the assembly, a human guest remained unobtrusive, positioned neither among royalty nor common observers. He watched, he listened, he calculated nothing. He simply paid attention. The attack came as a distortion rather than a sound. Light bent in the wrong direction. Air pressure shifted without warning. The assassin's weapon, designed to evade. It accounted for distance, timing, defensive protocols, and biological response delay. It accounted for everything except a human decision that refused calculation. He moved before thought completed itself. The distance between observer and sovereign vanished beneath instinct older than fear. The weapon struck his chest with kinetic force that shattered ceremonial silence into chaos. Energy discharged in a violent arc of brilliance. The queen did not fall. The human did. His body absorbed the impact that should have ended a dynasty. Shock immobilized the court. Royal guards converged, weapons raised, scanning for a threat that had already dissolved into nothing. The attacker had not intended survival, only success. Instead, there was a human lying motionless at the queen's feet, smoke rising from fractured fabric, breath shallow but present. He had not defended a ruler. He had interrupted inevitability. Medical response units arrived within seconds, their instruments registering trauma beyond survivable thresholds. Yet his heart continued. Not steady, not strong, but unyielding. The queen descended from the dais. Without ceremony, protocol fractured around her. She ignored them all. Her gaze remained fixed on the one individual who had interposed himself, enough to see the vast chamber distorted through pain. He did not ask for recognition. His first words were simple, almost confused, shaped by reflex rather than pride. Is she safe? The question carried no expectation of answer. It was merely confirmation of purpose fulfilled. He was transported to the Royal Medical Wing under maximum priority. Alien physiology specialists worked alongside human-compatible treatment systems rarely activated within Imperial space. The injuries were catastrophic. Energy had penetrated tissue, disrupted neural pathways, and fractured structural integrity across multiple systems. Yet survival persisted with defiant stability. Medical staff documented the phenomenon with increasing astonishment. Persistence undeniable. Within the royal chamber, the queen convened an emergency council. She listened, but her attention did not belong to strategy. It remained anchored to a single reality. A stranger had chosen her life over his own without obligation, without allegiance, without hesitation. Empires were built on loyalty, compelled through structure. This act had emerged from nothing but will. Investigators traced the assassin's origin to a network long believed dormant, an organization specializing in destabilization through precision, removal of leadership. Their calculations had been flawless, their intelligence complete, security protocols intensified. Yet one directive superseded all others, issued not as political order, but as personal decree. The queen commanded that the human remain under royal protection indefinitely. No transfer, no dismissal, no negotiation. The council interpreted the instruction as temporary gratitude. They did not yet understand its permanence. When the human regained sustained consciousness, he found himself in an environment far removed from the anonymity of a guest observer. Medical systems surrounded him. Royal insignia marked every surface. Outside the chamber, Elite guards maintained silent vigil. He attempted to rise, driven by instinct toward departure. A physician intervened gently but firmly. Movement was. Release was not authorized. Confusion replaced pain. He had completed an act of reflexive protection. The event should have concluded. Departure should have followed. Yet the environment insisted otherwise. The Queen herself entered the chamber, unaccompanied, her presence quiet yet absolute. She studied him not as a ruler evaluating a subject, but as one life acknowledging another that had altered her future. Her voice carried neither command nor ceremony. It carried certainty. He would not be dismissed. He would not be forgotten. He would not leave. Not because he was required, because he was chosen. Outside the chamber, the galaxy processed the implications of an attack that had failed. Inside, a different transformation began, quieter yet no less inevitable. A human who had stepped forward without intention of consequence now stood at the center of one he could not yet see. The act that saved the Queen had forged a bond. The throne itself refused to release. Recovery did not bring freedom. It brought realization. The human awoke to controlled light, measured air. Royal medical systems monitored every heartbeat, every neural impulse, every subtle fluctuation in cellular repair. His injuries had crossed the threshold of survivability hours ago, yet his body continued repairing itself with stubborn persistence. They studied it with disciplined intensity. Something had changed when he intercepted the attack, and no one yet understood what. He attempted to stand again when sensation returned to his limbs. Pain arrived immediately, sharp and absolute, but he accepted it as confirmation of life, rather than limitation. Two guards moved forward in synchronized restraint, not aggressive, not hostile, but immovable. He was not imprisoned. He was contained by decision beyond his own. That distinction unsettled him more than force would have. The Queen entered without announcement. Her presence altered the. Only the guards remained at the perimeter, silent witnesses to a conversation neither political nor ceremonial. She approached slowly, observing him with a focus that was neither gratitude nor curiosity alone. It was recognition. "You stepped into certainty," she said quietly. "Not probability. Certainty. You knew the outcome, chose it anyway." Her voice carried controlled emotion, restrained but undeniable. Uncertain how to address a sovereign who spoke not as ruler, but as one whose fate had been rewritten, he offered the simplest truth available. The right place to stand. No declaration. Only an answer shaped by instinct rather than intention. Her gaze did not waver. "Then understand this," she continued, tone steady, irrevocable. "Your decision did not end when the weapon struck. It continues now. You will remain under royal protection." The statement was not framed as request. It carried the finality of law shaped by personal will. He attempted objection, driven by reflexive independence, by the human tendency to depart once purpose was fulfilled. Words failed before forming fully. The unidentified human and the unprecedented decree preventing his departure. Some interpreted the Queen's action as strategic symbolism, others as emotional reaction, still others as evidence of concealed alliance with humanity. None possessed accurate understanding. The decision had not originated from politics. It had emerged from a moment of uncalculated sacrifice that no system of governance had prepared to interpret. Security investigations uncovered fragments of the assassin's design embedded within the damaged chamber floor. The weapon had not merely delivered energy. The intended result was irreversible collapse of cellular coherence. That the Queen survived was improbable. That the human survived after direct impact was without precedent. Analysts began to consider a possibility previously excluded from threat models. The weapon had not fully completed its function. Something within the moment of interception had altered outcome. medical specialists observed subtle energetic fluctuations within the human's physiology, patterns not generated by known biological processes. The fluctuations were not harmful. They were adaptive. Tissue regeneration occurred in precise coordination, as if guided by a stabilizing influence beyond normal metabolic repair. When exposed to residual energy signatures from the assassin's device, the fluctuations intensified rather than destabilized. The human was not merely healing. He was integrating. The Queen received the report without visible reaction. The act that had saved her life had created a convergence. Neither side fully comprehended. Releasing him into anonymity would not restore normalcy. It would disperse a phenomenon that now intersected with the stability of her rule. When she returned to his chamber later, her demeanor carried a different weight. Not distance, not authority, but measured honesty. You believe you are free to leave because you acted without expectation, she said. But consequence does not ask permission. Your presence altered an event that shaped more than my survival. He listened, tension visible beneath controlled posture. Humans accepted responsibility differently than most species. They did not claim intention for outcomes they had not sought. They accepted them anyway. He asked the only question that mattered to him. If I stay, what changes? Her answer arrived without hesitation. Everything stabilizes, including you. The statement was not metaphor. It was observation supported by evidence she had not yet shared. The convergence that began with an instinctive step forward now extended into governance, security, and something deeper neither had language to define. Outside, factions moved in quiet opposition. The failure of the assassination had not ended. Those who engineered the attack had anticipated removal of a monarch. They had not anticipated the emergence of a human variable capable of disrupting certainty itself. Intelligence channels reported renewed activity within shadow networks, recalculating strategy around a single unpredictable factor. Within the chamber, the human considered a reality unfamiliar to him. He had acted once decisively, without expectation of continuation. Now continuation demanded acceptance rather than action. Remaining required a different form of courage, one that resisted instinct to depart. He did not answer immediately. He did not agree. He simply remained where he was, breathing steadily, aware that the choice he had never intended to make was already unfolding. The Queen observed his silence without pressure. Some decisions required no declaration. They required presence. The bond forged in an instant of impact had not dissolved with survival. It had intensified with understanding. He had stood between her and death without command. Now she stood between him and a future neither of them yet comprehended, refusing to allow departure from a consequence still taking shape. Beyond the palace walls, the galaxy adjusted its calculations. A failed assassination had become an event of enduring consequence. A human who had acted without allegiance now existed at the center of imperial stability. And a queen, bound not by obligation but by recognition, had chosen a course that would not be reversed. The palace did not sleep after the attack. It adapted. Security layers multiplied without visible escalation, and every corridor carried a silence that was not peace but preparation. Information moved faster than authority could regulate it. Across diplomatic channels, the same question repeated in different forms. Who was the human, and why had the Queen bound him to the throne's protection with irreversible intent? He healed with unnatural precision. Not rapidly, not miraculously, but with a consistency that defied expectation. Tissue reconstructed in clean sequences. Neural pathways reconnected without degradation. Medical instruments recorded patterns of stabilization that resembled external guidance rather than internal recovery. When exposed to controlled remnants of the assassin's weapon energy, His vital signs did not weaken. They aligned. Physicians did not celebrate. They reported. It had remained. He noticed the change before anyone explained it. Sound carried differently in his perception, as if layers of vibration existed beneath what others heard. Movement registered before it occurred, not as foresight, but as recognition of tension preparing to resolve. He did not feel stronger. He felt precise, composed only of those whose loyalty preceded ambition. Evidence from the attack revealed a design beyond assassination. The weapon had been engineered to sever continuity at a biological and symbolic level simultaneously. Its purpose was not only to remove a ruler, but to fracture stability across. It had failed because a variable had entered the equation without origin in any model. A human decision had interrupted certainty itself. Intelligence reports identified renewed activity among covert destabilization networks. Their communications had shifted tone. No longer confident, no longer predictive. They spoke of an anomaly, of a human interference that had prevented completion of an operation considered mathematically inevitable. The Queen listened to the analysis without interruption. Her conclusion was immediate and unambiguous. The threat had not retreated. She spoke plainly, not as monarch, but as one who required truth unshielded by protocol. The attack did not end, she said. It adapted. He absorbed the words without outward reaction, yet something within him recognized their accuracy. Since the moment of impact, he had not felt pursued. He had felt targeted by absence, as if systems around him sought to erase alignment rather than confront it. He asked what she required of him. The question was direct, human, grounded in action. Her answer was equally direct. She described it as consequence. His presence had not created the phenomenon. It revealed it. Demonstration came sooner than expected. A maintenance sector adjacent to the royal wing experienced a structural fluctuation without detectable cause. Technicians responded according to protocol. It was insufficient. He moved without instruction. Then the cascade halted. Not reversed, not repaired, but prevented from completing. Systems recalibrated into equilibrium as if an unseen correction had been introduced at the precise point of failure. Observers recorded no energy discharge, no external intervention. Her expression controlled, yet unmistakably resolute. The Council's theoretical assessments had become empirical evidence. His presence did not oppose disruption. It resolved it. The implication extended beyond personal protection. It touched the foundation of governance itself. Stability, once maintained through force and negotiation, now possessed a human focal point. Opposition understood the shift as well. Encrypted transmissions, intercepted at the edge of imperial space, contained a revised directive from the network responsible for the original attack. Eliminate the variable. Not through confrontation, through separation. Remove him from proximity to the Queen, and the system would regain susceptibility to uncertainty. Within the chamber, he confronted a decision that differed from the one that had begun everything. Interception had required a moment. Remaining required endurance. He did not seek significance. He recognized necessity. They accepted it when recognition arrived. The Queen spoke with a steadiness that left no space for doubt. They will attempt to divide what has already aligned, she said. I will not allow it. Her words were not possessive. He understood that departure would not restore simplicity. He did not request position. He did not ask for purpose. He simply remained where consequence had placed him, breathing steadily, aware that action would come when misalignment demanded it. The palace adjusted around that stillness, and beyond its walls, unseen forces prepared their next attempt, not to defeat a warrior, but to remove a presence that had made certainty unreliable. The bond formed in a single instant of sacrifice had evolved into something quieter, and far more difficult to oppose. Not power, not authority, alignment. And those who thrived on instability had begun to understand that as long as he remained, their calculations would never again resolve as intended. The attempt began without violence. That alone made it dangerous. No alarms, no visible breach, no intrusion force. Instead, the palace experienced a sequence of minor disruptions so ordinary they escaped suspicion when viewed separately. Lighting, fluctuations in non-critical corridors, brief communication delays between security nodes, environmental systems recalibrating fractions of a degree beyond optimal range. Each anomaly corrected itself before intervention. Each left no trace. Certainty. He felt it before anyone recognized intent. Not threat directed at a person, but misalignment directed at structure. He rose from the recovery chamber without permission, movement steady despite incomplete healing. Guards attempted to intercept, but hesitation slowed them. They had witnessed his effect on instability. Restraint felt like interference with something. A transport corridor designed for rapid evacuation initiated a silent reroute of access permissions. Doors remained open, pathways unobstructed, but guidance. Systems redirected movement away from the Queen's position by increments too small to register as denial. It was separation by suggestion, not force. Advisors and attendants began drifting along altered routes, their presence redistributed with careful precision. Isolation approached without confrontation. He reached the junction where the pattern converged. He placed his hand against the wall, not searching, simply acknowledging the disturbance. For a moment, nothing occurred. Then the guidance field recalibrated, pathways restored. They resumed function as though deviation had never existed. The Queen arrived through a corridor that had attempted to redirect her moments before. Her expression revealed neither fear nor surprise, only confirmation. The opposition had chosen separation because confrontation had failed. Weakened security analysis revealed the mechanism. A distributed intrusion had entered palace infrastructure not to destroy, but to persuade. Algorithms introduced fractional uncertainties across independent systems, encouraging deviation through statistical bias rather than command override. No single anomaly justified response. Only collective awareness revealed intent. The strategy had been flawless against any conventional defense. It had not accounted for a human presence capable of sensing misalignment before manifestation completed. He did not claim responsibility for the correction. He did not speak of what he perceived. He simply remained where tension gathered until it dissipated. That restraint unsettled the council more than action would have. Power declared invites countermeasure. They seek distance, she stated. They believe separation restores vulnerability. Her gaze shifted briefly toward the human, then returned to the assembly. They will learn that proximity is not measured in steps. Intelligence confirmed the conclusion. Their models predicted success once. Proximity degraded below an undefined threshold. Each attempt to reduce the proximity failed without identifiable interference. Their calculations described a variable that did not act, yet prevented resolution of intended outcomes. He experienced the change internally as well. Recovery no longer felt like repair. It felt like calibration. Sensations refined. Awareness deepened. When instability approached, he did not anticipate it. He recognized it. Later, in a chamber overlooking the palace's outer spires, "You wish to leave," she said, not as accusation, but as acknowledgement of a truth she had observed from the beginning. It was origin. She nodded once, accepting the honesty. "Then understand what leaving means now," she continued. "Not departure, division. They will not strike where you stand. They will create absence and call it safety." He considered the statement without urgency. Humans rarely accepted permanence easily, yet they understood cost when clearly presented. She answered with equal clarity. It does not end, it stabilizes. Silence followed, not empty, but resolved. Outside palace systems operated with restored precision. Opposition had tested proximity and discovered that alignment persisted beyond distance measurable by corridors or commands. He returned to the recovery chamber by choice rather than instruction. Guards resumed their vigil, no longer uncertain of their role. Protection no longer meant confinement. It meant maintaining conditions in which alignment could persist. Across hidden channels, those who engineered instability revised their objective. Across systems that depended on the Queen's continuity, awareness settled into readiness without alarm. The first attempt had revealed method. The next would reveal intent without concealment. And, when it came, action would not be requested. It would be recognized. The escalation did not strike the palace first. It reached outward, targeting the fragile threads that connected the Queen's rule to distant systems. Trade relays failed without visible damage. Navigation beacons drifted out of alignment by margins too small for immediate detection. Entire regions of space experienced fractional distortions in timing synchronization, enough to disrupt coordination, but insufficient to trigger emergency response. Stability did not collapse. It eroded. The strategy was patient, methodical, and precise. Reports arrived faster than they could be analyzed. Allied governors requested clarification. Border fleets requested instruction. Civil networks demanded reassurance. No single event justified declaration of crisis, yet together they formed an unmistakable pattern of engineered uncertainty. The opposition had abandoned subtlety within the palace. They would now test whether distance from the human focal point could fracture the broader system that depended on the Queen's continuity. He sensed the shift before the data consolidated. The pressure was no longer localized. It stretched across perception like a distant storm that had not yet reached visible horizon. Recovery protocols had declared him stable, but stability felt incomplete when misalignment accumulated beyond the chamber walls. Remaining still was no longer neutral. It was delay. The Queen recognized the same inevitability. She convened the Van Council without ceremony and issued a directive that surprised even her most trusted advisors. A royal inspection would depart for the outer systems experiencing disruption, not as symbolic reassurance, but as direct presence. The council objected immediately. Security risk was unacceptable. The threat remained unresolved. Her response ended debate. Stability follows presence, she said quietly. Then presence must move. Preparation unfolded with disciplined urgency. Escort fleets assembled. Diplomatic channels were notified. Security contingencies layered across every stage of transit. Yet beneath the orchestration lay a decision no protocol could fully contain. She would not travel alone. The human would accompany her, not as guest, not as guard, but as a factor the opposition had already identified as critical. He did not volunteer. He did not refuse. When informed of the departure, he asked only whether the disruptions threatened lives. The answer required no elaboration. That was sufficient. Humans did not require broader justification. Once consequence became personal in scope, the royal vessel departed under controlled conditions. Its passage through orbital space marked by a silence that felt deliberate rather than ceremonial. Escort. Ships maintained precise formation, their presence protective but secondary to the unspoken variable at the vessel's core. As the fleet entered the first affected sector, the anomalies intensified. Navigation arrays flickered between accurate and erroneous readings. Energy distribution across local infrastructure fluctuated without pattern. Systems strained to maintain coherence. He stood within the observation chamber beside the Queen, neither speaking, neither directing. He focused not on instruments, but on the subtle tension underlying their failure. The sensation returned with unmistakable clarity. The same pressure he had felt within the palace, now magnified across vast scale. Misalignment seeking completion. Instability seeking confirmation. The vessel entered orbit around a relay platform, whose operational drift threatened entire trade corridors. Technicians reported cascading error sequences beyond correction. The Queen issued no orders. She simply remained present, her attention fixed outward. He moved toward the central interface column, not to operate it, but to acknowledge the disturbance concentrated there. His hand rested against the structure. For an instant, systems continued their descent toward failure. Then the drift halted. Not reversed, stabilized. Error sequences ceased propagating. Energy distribution equalized across the platform with a precision that instruments could measure but not explain. The effect extended outward, restoring synchronization across linked networks. Observers recorded the phenomenon in silence. No emission of force, no identifiable mechanism. Only alignment re-established where deviation had accumulated. The Queen's gaze remained steady, not surprised, but resolved. The Council's projections had been correct. Presence was not symbolic. It was functional. Across hidden channels, the opposition registered the change with immediate alarm. Their strategy relied on dispersion of instability beyond any single corrective influence. The humans' presence had extended that influence. Across systems they believed beyond reach. Escalation would no longer suffice. They required decisive action, capable of overwhelming alignment entirely. The next disruption arrived without delay. A coordinated failure ignited simultaneously across multiple sectors, too widespread for sequential stabilization. Navigation, collapse, communication blackout, and energy fluctuation converged into a single expanding event designed to exceed capacity for correction. It was not an attack on infrastructure alone. It was an attempt to prove that inevitability could be broken through scale. Within the royal vessel, tension sharpened into clarity. This was the confrontation the opposition had prepared since the assassination failed. Not through blade or explosion, but through engineered collapse vast enough to force a choice between preservation and impossibility. He felt the magnitude of it, not as fear, but as recognition of threshold. Some moments do not ask for action. They demand presence sustained beyond ordinary limit. He did not look to the Queen for instruction. She did not offer one. Their understanding required no exchange of words. She spoke only once, her voice calm within gathering uncertainty. "We hold." Not as command, as commitment. He stepped forward toward the central chamber where convergence of disruption registered. Most intensely. Pain returned with movement, but it did not slow him. He placed both hands against the interface structure as instability surged across systems beyond sight. Instruments recorded fluctuations approaching catastrophic threshold. Then, gradually, impossibly, the surge began to lose coherence. Not defeated. Dispersed. The event did not complete. Across sectors, systems stabilized incrementally, as if a single point of alignment had redistributed equilibrium outward through invisible connections. The attempted collapse failed to resolve. Not through counterforce, through persistence of presence. When the readings normalized, silence filled the chamber again. Not relief, recognition. The opposition had committed its largest measure of disruption and failed to achieve consequence. The Queen stood beside him as systems resumed function. She did not thank him. She did not praise him. Her acknowledgement was simpler and far more permanent. She would not permit departure from a convergence that had proven indispensable to stability across her domain. The conflict had entered its final phase. The opposition had revealed its full capacity. What remained was not escalation, but resolution. The failure of the sector-wide collapse did not silence the opposition. It revealed them. Hidden networks that had operated through proxies and distance now shifted into direct coordination. Intercepted transmissions lost their coded restraint and adopted urgency stripped of disguise. Their objective was no longer strategic destabilization. It was removal of the human variable at any cost, followed by immediate termination of the Queen's continuity. The pattern was clear. If inevitability could not be fractured, it must be confronted. The royal fleet detected the approach before visual confirmation. Space itself felt tense, as if movement waited for permission to become action. Multiple unidentified vessels emerged. From overlapping vectors, their configurations optimized for convergence rather than battle. They did not fire. They advanced with a precision that suggested a singular intention. Proximity sufficient to isolate, surround, and overwhelm through density rather than force. Inside the flagship, command personnel prepared defensive protocols. Weapon systems powered. Shield arrays calibrated. Tactical projections filled the chamber with layered trajectories. Yet at the center of preparation stood two figures who did not issue commands. The Queen remained composed, her presence unwavering. The human stood beside her, attention focused not on the approaching ships, but on the pressure building beneath perception. This was not an attack of impact. It was an attempt to impose absolute misalignment, to flood reality with contradiction. Until coherence collapsed, the first wave struck as a distortion across all sensory fields. Instruments displayed impossible readings. Energy signatures overlapped in mutually exclusive patterns. Navigation systems attempted to reconcile conflicting vectors and failed. For an instant, the fleet existed within a field where caused no longer guaranteed effect. Panic threatened to propagate through command channels. He stepped forward into the center of the chamber. Pain returned sharply, a reminder that endurance was not infinite. He accepted it without hesitation. Both hands rested against the central interface column, not to control, not to command, but to remain. The sensation of misalignment surged like pressure against a barrier that did not exist in physical space. It demanded resolution. He did not resist. He endured. Outside, the hostile vessels intensified their convergence. They did not seek to destroy. They sought to saturate the region with instability beyond corrective threshold. Their calculations predicted collapse within moments. Instead, something unexpected occurred. Their own formations began to drift, not from damage, but from loss of synchronized intent. Trajectories lost precision. Convergence faltered. The field of contradiction they had generated failed to sustain coherence. Within the flagship, instruments recalibrated. Readings that had defied interpretation aligned into stable patterns. The pressure receded, not violently, but steadily, like a storm losing force against an immovable horizon. The fleet's defensive systems had not fired. No counterattack had been launched. The confrontation resolved through persistence alone. The Queen observed the transformation without outward emotion, yet those who knew her understood the magnitude of the moment. This was not survival through defense. It was resolution through presence. She stepped closer to the human, her voice quiet but absolute. They revealed themselves because they believed inevitability could be broken by scale, she said. They were wrong. Opposition vessels attempted withdrawal. Their movements lacked cohesion. Some accelerated, others hesitated, as if unable to agree on direction. Without coordinated instability to sustain them, their advantage dissolved. Royal escorts moved to containment positions, not aggressively, but decisively. The threat that had once hidden behind certainty now existed within the same stability it had tried to destroy. Interrogation of captured transmissions exposed the final truth. The network behind the assassination was not a single power or rival empire. It was an ideology shared across factions that feared continuity beyond their control. They did not seek conquest. They sought a universe defined by permanent uncertainty, where no structure could endure long enough to resist manipulation. The Queen represented continuity. The human represented inevitability. Together, they embodied what the network could not tolerate. When the confrontation ended, silence returned to the flagship, deeper than before. Not the silence of tension, but of recognition. The conflict had reached its decisive point. The opposition's greatest effort had failed not through force, but through inability to overcome alignment sustained by human presence. He withdrew his hands from the interface column slowly, exhaustion evident but controlled. Recovery would require time, but consequence had already been established. The Queen faced him not as ruler addressing protector, but as one life acknowledging another that had altered the trajectory of countless others. Her words carried no command, only truth shaped by what had been witnessed. "You cannot leave," she said softly. "Not because I forbid it, because the galaxy has already recognized what you are." He did not answer immediately. Humans did not accept permanence easily. Yet he understood what had unfolded. His choice to act had not ended when the blade struck. It had continued through every moment since. Some decisions did not conclude. They endured. Beyond the flagship, stabilized sectors resumed function. Systems that had teetered on collapse now aligned with renewed precision. Across the domain, the realization spread quietly but irreversibly. The attempt to fracture continuity had failed. Inevitability had prevailed without conquest. After the confrontation, the galaxy did not erupt into celebration. It settled. Systems once strained by uncertainty resumed steady function, not because conflict had ended, but because instability no longer possessed authority. The oppositions. Failure had revealed a limit they could not cross. They had attempted to overwhelm alignment through scale, through contradiction, through saturation of uncertainty. Yet coherence had endured, not by dominance, but by persistence that refused. Displacement. The royal fleet returned to the capital under quiet escort. No ceremonial procession awaited them. No public declaration announced victory. Stability rarely arrived with spectacle. It arrived through continuity so complete that disruption lost meaning. Within the flagship, medical teams urged extended recovery, but he resisted confinement with gentle resolve. His strength had not returned fully, yet presence did not require strength. It required willingness to remain. The Queen addressed the council in a chamber that had once hosted urgent debate and calculated caution. Now her voice carried calm authority shaped by final understanding. The threat had not been defeated through conquest. It had dissolved because its foundation-engineered uncertainty could not sustain itself against a constant point of alignment. Governance would change accordingly. Security would no longer rely solely on force or prediction. It would rely on continuity maintained through presence. Opposition remnants scattered across distant sectors attempted to reorganize, but their communications lacked coherence. Without the capacity to generate sustained misalignment, their influence fragmented into isolated efforts that failed before gaining momentum. The universe they sought to impose a domain where nothing endured long enough to resist manipulation had encountered an exception they could not erase. They had learned that some choices, once made, generate consequences that outlast opposition. Within the palace, the atmosphere shifted in ways no decree could mandate. Guards no longer watched the human with uncertainty. They regarded him with recognition, not of rank, but a role. Advisors who had once debated his presence now structured policy around it. The Queen did not formalize his position within hierarchy. She refused to reduce inevitability to title. His place remained defined by proximity and trust rather than authority. He requested audience without ceremony. The Queen received him in a chamber open to the night sky, where distant stars reflected across crystalline surfaces in quiet motion. He spoke without preamble. "I did not intend this path," he said, not as objection, but as truth. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging what she had always known. "Nor did I intend to depend on another for continuity," she replied. "Yet intention does not govern consequence." He asked whether the threat would return. She answered, with clarity unsoftened by reassurance. Instability never disappears. It waits for absence. Her gaze remained steady. "You are no longer absence." Silence followed, not uncertain, but reflective. He understood the cost embedded in her words. Remaining meant accepting a life shaped not by choice alone, but by necessity recognized. Leaving would not restore independence. It would introduce a vulnerability the galaxy had already learned to measure. Humans valued freedom deeply, yet they valued responsibility once accepted even more. He looked beyond the chamber toward the distant lights of a civilization that had endured because a single moment of instinct had altered its trajectory. He had stepped forward once without calculation. The step had never truly ended. It had extended through every choice since, shaping a future he had not sought, but now understood. The Queen spoke again, her voice neither commanding nor pleading. "You face what was meant for me. Now you face what remains because of that moment. Not alone, not as subject. As one whose presence ensures that what endures continues to endure." Her words carried no demand. They offered recognition of a bond forged in necessity and sustained by shared understanding. He accepted not with declaration, but with stillness that held no intention of departure. Some commitments require no vow. They reveal themselves through continued presence when departure remains possible. The decision did not diminish him. It clarified him. Across the domain, alignment persisted. Trade routes stabilized. Diplomatic relations strengthened under renewed confidence. Systems that had once depended on fragile balance now operated with quiet assurance that continuity possessed a guardian not defined by power, but by refusal to yield. The Queen's final decree was issued without spectacle. The human would remain within the royal sphere not as protector bound by duty, but as one recognized by the throne itself. He would not be commanded. He would not be dismissed. He would remain because the future that had emerged from a single moment required presence to continue. In time, the galaxy would speak of the day a human faced an attack meant for a queen. They would recount the confrontation that followed, the instability that failed, the inevitability that endured. But within the palace, the truth was simpler and far more enduring. A life had chosen to stand. Another had refused to let that choice fade. Together, they had reshaped continuity without conquest. And so he remained, not as prisoner, not as symbol, but as the point where decision became permanence. The Queen did not release him because the galaxy itself had already accepted what his presence meant. Stability would endure, not because conflict had ended, but because absence no longer held power.